What's going on, everybody? It's Wayne. Welcome back to the Bigfoot Report. We got a few more that Miss Tiffany and myself want to share with you. We're going to start off telling you all about the time the camper had a Bigfoot look in the tent. Then we're going to talk about a solo camper in Shasta Trinity. We will follow that up with an encounter in Manitoba. And lastly, Tiffany will tell you all about former Forrest Ranger Jenkins and some of the stuff he experienced. Know you guys are ready. We're ready. Sit back, relax, because we're getting started.
I don't really know how to start this off, so I'm just going to give you the best account that I can. It's hard to put it into words, but it's even harder to believe that I experienced it firsthand. I can only hope to convey it to you the way it happened to me. To start, my folks owned some land in the Appalachians. That's where I grew up. I was always in the woods hunting with my dad and whatnot. I don't think there's ever been a hunting season that we missed. From small game to big game, we were there for it. Now, I'm fully aware of all the myth and legend that go along with living in that area. If something whistles at you in the dark, no, it didn't. Close your curtains before nightfall. If you hear your name being called, don't answer. All that stuff. But I don't recall ever hearing anything out of the ordinary or being fearful in the woods at all. This hunting season was set up like most all of them were. Dad and I got the blinds and everything we needed together and were set for the next day. I thought I'd just camp out on my folks' property and meet up with my dad the next morning before daylight. I'd say about an hour before dusk, I went a few miles into the woods to set up camp. I made my fire, set out my chair, and set up my tent. Night fell, and I had my fire going pretty good to knock the chill off and to keep stuff away from me so I could sleep a couple hours. As I was sitting around the fire before bed, I could hear the woods come to life. I heard all the scampering of smaller animals, insects, and so forth. But then I heard something I hadn't ever heard, all the while that I had lived there as a kid. A whistle. And then it sounded like two rocks being smacked together. I sat as still as possible listening for that sharp crack again. The forest then fell silent. The small game moving across the floor of the woods went still. Even the insects stopped making noise. I know when a predator is around, that'll happen, but as I said, I hadn't ever experienced anything like that. I started thinking back to all the stuff I'd hear about these mountains. I'm familiar with the stories of Bigfoot, and I've listened to encounters from others. I remember many say they hear whistles, wood knocks, and they have things thrown at them. I'm an open-minded skeptic. I just hadn't experienced that or ever seen a Bigfoot. My mom and dad never indicated to me that they had either. It was definitely something I had planned to ask my dad about in the morning. I sat there for probably another 30 minutes listening to everything around me. I went in my tent shortly after not hearing anything else out of the ordinary. I climbed in and realized when I went to zip it closed that the zipper was broken. I cursed under my breath, but honestly, I wasn't too perturbed about it. These woods were my home, and I still had my fire going low. I didn't have anything to offer whatever may attempt to come around except an empty soda can sitting on top of my cooler I had set off to the side. I fell asleep looking out my tent door at the stars and listening to the insects that had started again. I guess an hour or so had passed when I heard something knock the empty can off my cooler. It hit the ground and startled me. I'm a light sleeper. I always have been. I didn't really think anything of it, though. It could have been the wind that blew it off. Suddenly, though, just as I'm about to go back to sleep, I heard footsteps. I was laying there thinking it may be later than what I thought, and my dad had come up. I scrambled to look at my watch, but it was only a little past 2 in the morning. No way that was him. But I didn't know why there were footsteps. Something was clearly walking around my tent a little further back. It was definitely bipedal. Deer don't sound like that when they walk, and their footsteps are nowhere near that heavy. As slowly and as quietly as I could, I reached over and grabbed my 9mm. My brain was trying to process the sounds of the footsteps and what else they would belong to. That's when this overwhelming feeling of fear came over me. That was a whole new feeling for me because, as I mentioned earlier, I hadn't felt fear in the woods. But there it was, and I'm not afraid to admit that at 45 years old, I was scared shitless. My heart rate went up, and I had started shaking. Adrenaline. It's a pain. The footsteps got closer and closer, and I could hear the leaves that had fallen crunching with every step. I steadied myself as much as I could, and I was ready to just slowly leave my tent to see what it could be. It probably wasn't a good idea, but at the time, even though the steps were heavier than I've ever heard any person make in the woods, I wanted to make sure that this wasn't a person, because more times than not, they are more dangerous than animals. When I sat up, I noticed the glow from the dimly lit fire was casting shadows around. That's when I heard the footsteps come right up to the side of my tent. I froze. The only sound I could hear then was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I quietly scooted back until I was up against the back of my tent. I was really angry now that the zipper had broke, and I was unable to close the door. I was free game right then. Just as the deer we hunt, I was now prey to whatever this is. The shadow of whatever it was now casting on the side of my tent, and it was huge. That's when I realized this was something that had legs like a human, but way larger in comparison. If I wanted to, I could have reached out and grabbed it. That's how close it was. But I just sat there shaking, staring at this large shadow. That's when I came to reality and knew that this had to be a Bigfoot. They really are here. My biggest fear then was the damn open door. I scoffed quietly at my 9mm. That thing wouldn't even make a dent in this. If the shadow of the legs I'm seeing is that large, it's just going to bounce right off. I really thought I was a goner as it took 2 more steps to the front of my tent. I thought to myself then, yep, this is how I'm going to go. I made peace with God and waited for it to rip the tent off of me and either kill me or carry me off. I heard it open my cooler, and I had thoughts of just running as fast as I could to my parents' house while it was distracted. Fear will take you pretty far when you think you're running for your life, and with all the adrenaline I had, I could have probably made it there in no time. But I felt like I was part of the ground. I couldn't move. It gruffed disgustedly as it moved items around, almost like it was perturbed that I didn't have anything it liked. One more step, and it was standing at the entryway of my tent. The legs, I can tell you, were massive and muscular. It was covered in hair, not fur. It turned and grabbed the top of my tent and began to shake it. I was screaming at this point, and I guess it caught this, whatever it is, but I could only assume a Bigfoot, off guard. The shaking stopped when it heard me. That's when it bent over, and it looked inside my tent. I don't really know how to describe to you how I felt at that point. I knew I was going to be another missing person case. I was just sure of it. This thing's head was probably 2 of mine. The face was that of an ape, but at the same time had qualities about it that appeared human-like. Thick brow ridge, flat nose, thin lips, but a very broad mouth. I had my gun in my hand, but I tell you, I couldn't shoot it. I just couldn't. A low rumble came from his chest then, and I instantly felt dizzy. I had lost my bearings and felt like I was going to be sick. And then I guess I just blacked out. I don't remember anything after that. I jerked when I heard my dad yelling my name. It was now daybreak, and my dad was pissed. I quickly crawled out of my tent and was frantically looking around in fear that this huge beast was out there and it was going to get my dad. But it was gone. No tracks, no nothing. My cooler was still open, and I could see where everything in there had been moved, so I knew this wasn't just some awful dream. I tried to explain it to my dad, but he just said we'd talk about it later. I declined hunting for the day, obviously. To be honest, it took me a good long while before I went back. Dad had hurt his back the next year, so we couldn't go then either. I was fine with that. I know people have their opinions about these things, and if you happen to read this, I'm sure I'll catch some slack, and that's okay. But I know what I experienced regardless of what anyone says. I'm just glad to have been able to see another day. I couldn't begin to tell you why the Bigfoot didn't kill me. I'm just glad that he didn't. Thanks for listening and for all that you do.
In August 2009, a witness who resided in Gillum, Manitoba, reported an extraordinary encounter while driving to her husband's workplace along PR 280 at around 3 o'clock p.m. After turning off a residential road. She observed a tall figure moving through the trees to her right. This figure abruptly jumped onto the shoulder of the road as she drove by. The witness was startled and described the creature as having a large wolf's head, but standing upright on 2 legs with human-like aspects. As she glanced in her rearview mirror, she noted that the creature quickly crossed the road. The witness recalled the size of the creature being unusually large, estimating it to be at least 7 feet tall and weighing around 400 pounds. The body was covered with charcoal-colored fur featuring darker patches. She initially thought it might be a cleverly disguised prank, potentially involving a person in a costume. However, the time of year was during hunting season, which made the explanation unlikely. Following the sighting, she shared her experience with her husband, who later investigated the area. He discovered that prior to this encounter, there had been reports of a large wolf spotted along the river, but nothing further was known about such a sighting. The witness expressed uncertainty regarding her husband's belief in her encounter, which added to her confusion and concern. Additionally, she mentioned consulting her uncle, who had indigenous knowledge, and expressed that she should forget about it, suggesting there might be cultural implications associated with the sighting. This interaction further mystified her experience, leading her to question the nature of what she observed. The area where the sighting took place is described as heavily wooded, with a mix of residential and natural landscapes, which would provide ample hiding spots for large wildlife. This raises the question of what else might inhabit the wilderness surrounding the urban areas of Manitoba. This encounter aligns with other reports of similar creatures often referred to as dogman, which are characterized by their wolf-like heads and upright posture. The witness later connected her experience to broader narratives of dogman sightings that had been reported in various locations across North America, sparking a sense of camaraderie among those who have had similar encounters. The account provides insight into the emotional impact of the encounter on the witness, as she describes feeling chills and an overwhelming sense of disbelief at what she had seen. Such experiences can often leave a lasting impression, not only on those who witness them, but also on their families and communities. In conclusion, the witness's account from Gila, Manitoba contributes to the growing collection of North American cryptid sightings, specifically involving dogman-like creatures. The details surrounding this encounter, including the time of day, environmental conditions, and the emotional state of the witness, provide a compelling narrative for further investigation and documentation within Bigfoot sightings.
Solo camper encounters large dark figure in Shasta Trinity National Forest. The witness, a software developer seeking respite from their daily life, embarked on a solo camping trip in the Shasta Trinity National Forest in late September of 2024. The intention was to find peace and disconnect from the stresses of modern life. After an arduous hike, they set up camp near a bubbling creek, surrounded by the tranquil sounds of the forest. As night descended, the witness lit a small fire and settled down with a cup of coffee. Initially feeling at ease, they soon became aware of an unsettling sensation, as if they were being watched. This feeling intensified as night fell, but they dismissed it as nerves typical of camping alone. However, the tranquility of the night shattered when they were abruptly awakened by a deep, haunting howl reverberating through the trees. The sound was unlike anything they had heard before, primitive and raw, almost human. Struck by fear, the witness grabbed a flashlight and attempted to identify the source of the sound, but found nothing in the darkness. The next morning, the witness explored the area, still haunted by the howl from the night before. Their exploration led them to an old logging road littered with remnants of machinery and signs of abandonment. While investigating, they encountered strange markings on the trees, resembling deep scratches that were well beyond their reach. As they examined the markings, they were startled by rustling in the underbrush. Turning around, they found nothing but a sense of unease settled in. That evening, while sitting around the fire and recording a voice memo about their day, the chilling howl returned. But this time it was closer. Heart pounding, they scanned the dark tree line with their flashlight and spotted a massive figure just beyond the fire's light. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur that camouflaged it within the shadows. The witness described the creature's eyes as glowing like fiery coals and noted that it appeared to observe them with a head tilted, seemingly assessing the situation. In a state of disbelief, the witness felt frozen, torn between fear and an inexplicable pull to observe the creature. As they fumbled with their phone to record the encounter, the Bigfoot emitted a low growl, which served as a warning. The sudden vibration of their phone and the light caused the creature to step back into the darkness, disappearing amongst the trees, leaving the witness both exhilarated and terrified. As silence returned to the night, the witness sat breathlessly, trying to process what had just happened. Moments later, the howls returned, but this time they were joined by others, suggesting that there were multiple creatures communicating in the forest. The witness's instinct screamed for them to flee, but they were captivated by the moment. However, the appearance of additional figures, each similar in stature to the first, overwhelmed their composure. The largest of the creatures stepped into the firelight, and the witness felt an intense gaze directed at them. Fear surged again, but there was also an unexpected connection. The creature emitted a sound reminiscent of a grunt or a coo, which was responded to by the others with a series of low rumbling calls. Despite the impulse to understand, survival instinct took over, prompting the witness to retreat to their tent. Inside the tent, the witness could hear the creatures moving outside, their footsteps barely audible. A sudden tremor against the tent signaled that something was testing its strength, causing sheer panic. Silence enveloped the night once again, and the witness held their breath, straining to hear any movement. After a period of time, they mustered the courage and unzipped the tent to peek outside. The fire had burned low, and the clearing was shrouded in darkness with no sign of the creatures remaining. Feeling a mix of relief and confusion, the witness quickly packed up their belongings, still keenly aware of the forest's watchful presence, as they hiked back to their vehicle during the early morning hours. The sense of being observed persisted. Once they reached their car and drove away, they couldn't shake the realization that they had encountered something extraordinary, something beyond their comprehension. The encounter left a lasting impact, forever altering the witness's perception of the forest and the creatures that might inhabit it. Their attempts to share this experience with others were met with skepticism, but the witness knew they had brushed against the unknown. Each night, the echoes of the creatures' calls haunted them, serving as a reminder of the wild mysteries that lie just beyond human understanding. Ranger Jenkins encounters a large, unknown creature in Pisgah National Forest. On the evening of October 11th of 2024 at approximately 6:47 p.m., Ranger Jenkins was conducting a routine patrol at the Looking Glass Rock Overlook in Pisgah National Forest, Transylvania County, North Carolina. As he arrived at the empty parking area and exited his patrol vehicle, Jenkins immediately sensed an abnormal silence in the forest, a stark contrast to the usual sounds of wildlife at dusk. This unsettling quiet prompted him to proceed with caution. After checking for any remaining visitors, Jenkins noticed fresh boot prints near the trailhead, indicating possible human presence, despite the absence of any individuals. As he was about to call out for anyone who may still be in the area, Jenkins was startled by the sound of a large branch snapping from the tree line about 30 yards away. He identified the noise as coming from something significantly larger than a typical bear, heightening his alertness. Jenkins announced his presence, demanding identification from the unseen entity he sensed nearby. The ensuing silence was palpable, with Jenkins feeling an intense prickle of awareness at the back of his neck. He aimed his flashlight into the growing shadows, and upon doing so, he caught a glimpse of a massive figure emerging from behind a large pine tree. This creature stood upright and was described by Jenkins as competing in height with the surrounding trees, estimated to be over 9 feet tall. The creature was covered in matted fur and had an unsettlingly human-like face, which appeared both ape-like and disturbingly intelligent. Jenkins noted the reflective quality of its eyes, which shone back at him in the beam of his flashlight. In a moment of shock, Jenkins stumbled back as the creature took a step forward, revealing its impressive stature. The creature seemed to regard him with an awareness that filled Jenkins with dread. He instinctively reached for his bear spray as the creature tilted its head, observing him with a predatory focus. Jenkins experienced a clash of his ranger training and primal fear, recognizing that this was not any wildlife he had been trained to encounter. At that moment, the radio on Jenkins' belt burst to life, causing the creature to react with startling speed. Taking advantage of the distraction, Jenkins attempted to retreat while fumbling with his bear spray. Jenkins described the creature's musky scent as filling the air around him with a reminder of decay and something vaguely metallic. As Jenkins regained his composure, he attempted to communicate with dispatch, but struggled to articulate what he had just encountered. The radio crackled with urgency as his colleague in dispatch, Sarah, tried to ascertain his status. Jenkins managed to respond, albeit vaguely, attributing his silence to radio interference. He noted the time had somehow elapsed to 7:02 p.m., suggesting that he had lost track of time during this extraordinary encounter. The forest remained eerily quiet, and Jenkins felt an overwhelming urge to flee, yet his body was paralyzed by fear. As he scanned the area with his flashlight once more, he caught sight of the creature's large amber eyes set high above the ground, indicating that it had somehow risen to a greater height than before. The tension grew as Jenkins issued a formal warning, reiterating the restricted area after sunset while wrestling with the absurdity of treating the situation like a typical wildlife encounter. The creature stepped forward again, its imposing figure casting a shadow that consumed Jenkins' light. The ground trembled slightly under its weight, and Jenkins could feel the oppressive atmosphere intensifying. Each moment stretched as the creature's presence loomed larger in Jenkins' mind, revealing a blend of primal terror and the instinct to defend himself. As Jenkins stood at the edge of the overlook, he found himself cornered. The creature exhibited a complex mix of curiosity and calculated aggression. The radio crackled once more, and Jenkins' verbal communication was met with more urgency from his colleagues who were trying to reach him. The creature responded to the radio sound with heightened alertness, displaying a degree of intelligence that unsettled Jenkins. With a profound realization of the danger he faced, Jenkins surveyed his surroundings, noting the absence of other people and the increasing darkness enveloping the area. The creature emitted a low growl that resonated deep within Jenkins' chest, an ominous sign of its potential aggression. Ultimately, Jenkins was left to confront the reality of what he had witnessed. A large, unknown creature in the forest, embodying a fear that transcended typical wildlife encounters. As the tension heightened, Jenkins' ranger instincts battled with the primal fear of facing something that felt all too real, yet entirely unexplainable. The encounter left Jenkins questioning the nature of what he had experienced, and with a chilling certainty, he understood that the forest held secrets far beyond his understanding.